Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Directors meeting for the first Tuesday in 2017, January 3rd. I'd like to welcome everybody that's with us here in City Hall or maybe watching or listening on our public access channels. Welcome and wish you all a happy new year as we go about to do the city's business. And we have a little bit of business on our agenda tonight. But first of all, I'd like to ask our city clerk to read the roll.
Director Hendricks, Director Richardson,
Here.
Director Webb,
Here.
Director Peck,
Here.
Director Wright,
Here.
Director Wyrick,
Here.
Director Campuris,
Present.
Director Fortson,
Here.
Director Adcock,
Present.
Vice Mayor Hines,
Present.
Mayor Stola.
Here. Let me call on City Director Joan Adcock for our invocation, please.
Would we please bow? Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight as we start our meeting to ask your blessings upon this meeting, Lord, and let all of our decisions be the will that you would have for us. Dear Lord, please be with our employees. Please guide them and direct them and keep them safe, those in uniform and those without uniform. Guide and direct everything that we do, that we can be a blessing to the people we serve. We ask in your holy name. Amen.
If you would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
before we get started, if I could approach the podium for just a quick second.
Sure.
I didn't place this on the agenda because I wanted it to be a surprise, but today is Officer Edmund Brooks's last official board meeting with us. Officer Brooks is going to the School Resource Officers Program. So it actually is bittersweet, but it will give him an opportunity. He has 2 kids in the public school system, and it'll give him an opportunity to spend a little bit more time with his children. One's at Central and one's at Fair Park, yeah. And so when we were informed of it, and so I wanted to, Officer Brooks, if you would come up and on behalf of the we've enjoyed getting to know you over the years. I actually knew Edmund when he was in high school or even junior high. I used to date his sister back years ago, but and he always wanted to be, this is in Pine Bluff, he always wanted to be a Little Rock police officer. So, Edmund, congratulations. We're going to miss you.
I do appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You want to say anything, Edmund? Yeah, we want to thank you for keeping us safe, and I can't imagine the stories you tell after Tuesday night meetings.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and serve in this capacity. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I've always enjoyed coming here on Tuesday nights. I know we have some very interesting stories to tell sometimes, but I enjoy it. I appreciate it.
Good luck to you.
Oh, thank you.
I think there's a couple directors might want to comment. Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I hate to see him go too because he's a real close friend of our family. And I'll tell Phyllis that you're slipping away from him. Okay,
ma'am.
all right. Good luck.
Vice Mayor Hines?
Well, I hate to see you go from up here, but I know you're gonna be hanging out over in Northwest Patrol, right?
Oh, well, I'll be at the school resource at the
School, okay,
Hamilton Learning Academy.
okay, well, good deal. Well,
School Resource.
Hamilton Learning Academy.
Hamilton?
Oh, yeah.
Director Richardson?
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly appreciate the service that you provided for us, and I want to let you know you've been the epitome of what our police officers are, and your excellent representation on Little Rock PD. And I appreciate how you carry yourself in these meetings and how you engage not only board members but the public that come in there. You're well representative of our police department. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Director Wyrick?
Thank you. You can't leave yet.
I did not know you until you started working here at City Hall with us, and I've enjoyed, I guess we visit every Tuesday night. He may be working in Ward 6, but he lives in Ward 7. So I found out he's a neighbor of mine, so we're going to miss you. It was a joy to talk to you and get to know you, so good luck wherever you're going. I know you'll do a good job.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Director Wright.
Well, since you live in Ward 7, that's okay, because most of your time is spent at work, so I get in more than you. And I just live right down the street, so I'm being a lot more proactive with my schools because I really want to see things level out, and I've been meeting with the superintendent, and I'll be meeting with the principals next week. So we will see each other.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
anyway, good luck, and as Director Richardson said, your presence here has been very well received.
Thank you.
Director Adcock.
Yes. Oh, boy. You know, I really think the 11 years of us has trained you for that school. I don't think you'll have any problem with them.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And I've appreciated your smile every Tuesday night.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund.
All right.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
We'll be seeing you on the streets. Okay. Thank you, Bruce, for that recognition. And I presume next Tuesday there'll be somebody else standing there, huh? Okay. All right. The first item on our agenda is to accept the oaths of office for our 4 Little Rock City Board of Directors. And the oaths are filed in the city clerk's office. Let me ask for a motion to accept the oaths of office from Cappy Peck for Ward 4, Dr. Dean Compuris for position 8, Gene Fortson for position 9, and Joan Adcock for position 10. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. You all been accepted by your colleagues. Congratulations. Unanimous. Is that a sign of the future? I hope. Okay, we can now move on to the other items on the consent agenda, and I'll ask the clerk to read items 2 through 8, please.
A resolution to set January 17th, 2017 as the date of public hearing on the request to abandon the 30-foot wide alley right-of-way located along the west side of Block 4, Deaf Mute Addition in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with River City Hydraulics in the amount of $65,875,000 for the repair of a 2016 Mack refuse truck for the Public Works Department and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into annual purchasing contract with Fleet Safety Equipment for the purchase of emergency vehicle lighting and equipment with an option to renew annual for 2 additional years with an annual budget not to exceed $350,000 and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize a contract increase for Burkhalter Technologies Incorporated in the amount of $25,000 for additional improvements to P Street from Pierce Street to Taylor Street and for the purposes, funding from the 2012 3/8 capital improvement sales tax and the 2013 limited tax general application capital improvement bonds. A resolution to authorize the city manager to award a contract to Cisneros Family Construction Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $150,437.69 for the construction of Meadow Cliff sidewalks Phase 2 and for the purposes, funding from the 2012 3/8 capital improvement sales tax and the 2013 limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution to require the 2016 audit to be performed in accordance with the guidelines and formats prescribed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and the United States Government Accountability Office, and for the purposes, a resolution to authorize the city manager, or the mayor, city manager, and city clerk to execute all documents required for the purchase and demolition of the property located at 7521 Stagecoach Road for flood mitigation purposes and for other purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. Are there any, is there any questions or any discussion about any of the items? All right, hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The resolutions have passed. I've got one card for citizen communications. Before I ask for a motion to go into executive session, Mr. Nichols, welcome. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mayor, board members, and Ms. Peck. Nice to see you here. I'm Jim Nichols, the representative of the ASME Union of the non-uniformed employees. We had quite a bit of discussion last meeting about the status of negotiations, so I thought I would show up tonight. Not sure exactly what I would say, but we are in a lull right now. Part of the problem is some of our people in Washington, D.C. were on vacation, and I couldn't get some numbers back, but I hope we can reach an agreement. I'm not as optimistic as I would like to be, but that's the nature of this line of work, or this profession of labor negotiations. But I thought if any of you folks had a question to me, I would try to respond without getting into negotiating with you. But you do set policy, and a lot of the things that we deal with are policy. So, you know, it's I recognize that within a city manager form of government, you're a little bit different. You give your mayor some executive powers, so I'm not sure exactly where you draw the line on all that. But anyway, we're in negotiations. The people on the staff in D.C. got back today. They're looking at the last proposal that the city submitted, and I hope I'll be able to have a response to that tomorrow.
Okay, Director Adcock, do you have a question for Mr. Nichols?
No question for Mr. Nichols. As the city director, I have for 24 years.
Hit your button again, please, John.
Okay. Mr. Moore has told us that he is working on this, waiting for figures and everything, and I know that with all the holidays, things have moved very slowly. But as a city director, as for 24 years, I will not be negotiating on this, and instead wait for Mr. Moore to finalize what he is going to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Moore, I assume you're in discussions currently as it relates to these issues?
That is correct, Mayor.
Very good. Well, if you just keep us advised on how it's progressing, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. I want to mention one thing, because I know after we get done with the executive session, we lose everybody quickly. You've got on your before you the agenda for the Arkansas Municipal League Winter Conference, and I just want to point out a couple things about it and ask for your participation. You know, this is 2017 is obviously a legislative session, and we are. Are you seeing the tentative agenda? I think
It's in your folder.
Laura handed them out.
Somebody did.
Everyone doesn't have one? Okay, we'll make sure and get you one. Jennifer, if Laura is out there, she might still have a few more of these, please. I want to mention, since it's an upcoming legislative session, and there's obviously been substantial changes in the composition of the General Assembly, it's very important that we municipalities not only work together, but that from a city of Little Rock, a capital city, that we really show and engage ourselves with our representatives and state senators. And you'll see that on the opening night, Wednesday, is a big banquet, and all the constitutional officers are going to be speaking, as well as I presume the President Pro Tem and the Speaker of the House, Jerry Gillum and Jonathan Dismayne. I really would urge you all, if you can, to try and make it to that luncheon, or excuse me, to that banquet. And then we host on Thursday morning, we host the breakfast. And it's always very well attended, and we hand out our little rocks. And there are some of you who are very regular about doing that, and some that I would love to invite you to join me at least by 7:30 or 8 o'clock to help greet our conventioneers and delegates that are there. What? That's right. And then finally, I want to mention that the noon luncheon, the city is going to be receiving an award as one of the Volunteer Communities of the Year. So certainly it would be nice to have representatives from our city directors that are at that as well. And of course, there are many other discussions and items of interest throughout that Thursday, Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday. So if you'll take a look at that, and those three things I wanted to really point out and ask for your participation in. Okay, Director Richardson, you asked for to speak.
Yes, Mayor. Do you have to be signed up for the conference to attend the banquet that night you're inviting us to?
I believe yes, you have to register, but Laura can handle that for you.
And there's no deadline on the registration. Those of us who hadn't signed up,
They,
we
you
still
can sign
can.
up right there.
Okay. Mayor and board members, Mr. Nichols, his comments regarding policy is a perfect segue to an issue or a question I want to bring to Bruce's attention. And Mayor, I think you and I talked about this about a month ago after a board meeting. And I think after we had a conversation around the take-home car policy, actually not a residency policy, we had discussion on the take-home car policy. And I think on or about September 25th or 26th, one of Chelsea's colleagues, Ryan Terranelli, and if I mispronounce his name, please forgive me, wrote an article about this, and whether or not we have any update or any resolution on that take-home car policy that evolved from the residency conversation we had.
Director Richardson, I have been looking at a lot of various options on the take-home car policy. I haven't finalized anything. Obviously, there are things that have to be considered, and I'm looking at best practices across the country. I feel like I'll have that finalized sometime within the next 30 days, but that's where I am at this point.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I think that policy is based on responsibilities or duties, if I'm not mistaken, and doesn't have any.
Okay, somebody down there doesn't have one.
It doesn't have any restriction and/or regulation regarding distance from the city.
The current one does not. You're right. You're correct.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, I mean, why are we talking about this? You know, recently there's been an uptick in violence at the end of last year, and I think it caught a lot of our attention, particularly with the toddlers. We certainly were. There was a lot of outrage and anger and attention given to the violence in our community. And my point around that is an observation, not an indictment, so I don't need anybody to get defensive or offensive. Observation of what's been happening with criminal activity, especially related to violence in our community recently. And while we all know crime seems to be mobile, violent crime seem to be concentrated in certain parts of our community. And Mayor, you can probably attest to this, being a former prosecutor attorney. A lot of these crimes, violent crimes, are not just restricted, taking away the narrow view, not restricted to cold, maniacal, gang-involved killers. Now, some of them are financial crimes, involve some financial challenges and difficulties, and it's certainly something that we can't police our way out of. We can't jail our way out of, because police and jail, they don't address unemployment or underemployment or neighborhood disintegration. And while it's difficult for us to solve some of these crimes, that may be the easy part, Mayor. And I think that a lot of times these financial crimes, these violent crimes, they not evolve but devolve to gang involvement or gang activity. And we don't want to have this normalized in our community. And I would hope and expect this year we will have the same level of outrage and anger and willing to not accept this as normal behavior when anybody gets murdered in our community. Any level of violence that, we have anything in our community, that we have that same level of outrage and attention given to any violent crime in our community. We don't want this to be normalized in certain parts of our community. We want it to be normalized with certain people in our community. We want to have that same anger and say, we're not going to tolerate this in our community. We're not going to have this. Whether you're 2, 3, or 23, or 15, or 16, whether you come from a certain category or a certain part of our community, we're not going to have this. This is not going to be accepted or normalized in our community. We want to have the same level, Mayor, of attention, Bruce, and anger and outrage whenever it happens to anybody in our community. And I say that as a segue. You know, the violence in Chicago certainly was an issue during the presidential campaign. It was an issue. It was on 60 Minutes Sunday, and there's been a lot of attention given to the violence in Chicago last year. And here's what's interesting, guys. If you adjust for population, the level of violence in Little Rock was 2.5 times the level in Chicago. Now, while we didn't get the same national recognition, that same attention, we didn't get that as part of a conversation, Mayor, the presidential conversation, 2.5 times the level of violence in Chicago is unacceptable. And I think it's something that we should be willing to address and not just couch it within the confines of jail, more jails, bigger jails and more police, because they can't address those unemployment or underemployment issues. They cannot address those educational issues. Some of the things, Mayor, you've seen and you know, being a former prosecuting attorney, that there's some underlying factors that contribute to people doing some of this crazy kind of stuff in our community. We're not going to have that. And I think we need to send that message loud and clear that this is not going to be normalized in any part of the city. It's not going to be normalized with any certain group in our city, that we're going to say this is unacceptable. We're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to have it. 2.5 times Chicago. That's unacceptable. 2.5 times. And think about all the attention that's been given to the level of violence in Chicago the last 5 or 6 months. It was part of the presidential campaign. There was a story on 60 Minutes this past Sunday about it, and it upsets me, it frightens me, and it angers me that we're at 2.5 times that level of violence, Mayor. That's all I have to say.
Well, obviously, I think all of us on the board don't accept any level of violence or the taking of anybody's life. And certainly the discussion we've had about trying to not only figure out how to prevent violence, but the various programs that we have are, and also recognizing the importance of eliminating the shortage of police officers is something that is, I know, uppermost on everybody's mind. And I mentioned to Bruce and to the chief and to the assistant chiefs, we had a meeting to talk about what's going to be done to try and reduce that shortage. And sometime this month, probably toward the end of the month, we're going to get a report on that. So I think we all feel the same level of frustration. I don't know about the statistics on that. I'd be interested to see that. I saw some statistics that actually showed that our rate was not as high as North Little Rock's per capita. So
Well, with 2.5
it's all
times,
relative
with
to
2.5
to a
times,
relationship of the number of citizens to the type of crimes that are occurring. But
well, I'll share that information.
you know
with you,
that
Mayor.
all of us know that our number one objective is to do everything we can in the position that we're in to try and keep our citizens safe
Well,
and
I say that, Mayor, that
and violent.
I'll give you that information if you want it, and I say that it's not going to be accepted or expected in any specific part of our city, any specific ward in our city, and that we're not just going to accept it. And with any certain category of people or group of people in our community, that is not be accepted, and we have the same level of anger and outrage. And I'll say this again, Mayor, I don't think this is something we can police our way out of. I just don't think that. I mean, I don't think the police are responsible for employment, underemployment. I don't think they're responsible for education or lack of education. I think, Mayor, when you were a prosecuting attorney, you saw some similar characteristics of the people who came before you in the court. I just think that we just can't rely on police and police only. I think that's a real narrow way to couch this, a real limited set of lens to look at this, because if you look at it through these lenses, you're going to have a real distorted observation. I know my friend Dr. Compiers here can tell us that an improper diagnosis can render improper cure, an improper prescription for the problem that you're trying to address. So I just wanted that to be known that in 2017, whether it's in Ward 3, 4, 1, or 2, this is not going to be accepted. We're not going to expect this because it's a certain part of our community or involves a certain category of people in our community that it's not going to be accepted. And we're going to have a message from this board that we're not going to tolerate it. And the message is going to be hopefully through some direct policies that are going to address this. That's all I have to say on that, Mayor.
Okay. Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. Since Director Richardson raised this point, I would like to share with the board that I did receive a report from the city manager regarding crime in my area, in particular gunfire. And from October 30th to November 15th, his report advised me that there had been 39 separate incidents of gunfire, and that one fatality had resulted in one fatality. And I had heard about that, and when I first talked with him about it, he told me he didn't think that that had happened, but in your report, you showed that it did happen, where the young man was just walking down Barrow, and a car pulled up by him and asked him where did he live, and they shot him, and he made it to the hospital, but he later died. I'm looking for solutions. And if Director Richardson has any policies, recommendations, I'll be happy to entertain whatever. I have constituents who are afraid. A lot of this seems to be random. I have one apartment complex who have repeatedly turned in, and that's where I've been told by my precinct captain where the road was just full of shell casings from automatic weapons. So it is a problem, and it's a problem I know in my area, and I have residents who are afraid because a lot of this did seem to be random. So I'm waiting and hoping for a follow-up report as to what we can do to combat some of this. But if there are any policy suggestions that we need to implement, I would like to hear them so we can entertain it.
All right. Director Hendrick.
Were we supposed to do something with this? That's why I wrote on it. I was just doing it.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I need not be redundant because I think directors, the two directors have expressed what it is about the crime, but I would be the first to admit that most of the crime is committed by black people, okay? And that's a thing that we are going to have to address, but we need everybody's help. I think we need to start at our churches. I think that we as board members need to appear at some of these meetings. Of course, I've seen Director Richardson on TV with a lot of the people, but I think we need to come out of these shells of being afraid. And I say to the Caucasian members of this board, you have a responsibility also to deal with this issue. Not just read about it in the paper, but to do something about it. And I don't know what it is, but the thing that I say as a parent with 6 adult children that never saw the inside of a facility that has to do with children with crime, parenting is just not happening today. And that is one of the real problems. We have parents that want to be buddies with their children. You don't raise children like that. You've got to be a parent. Now, I know a lot of these crimes that have been committed are committed by older individuals, but really and truly, one of the things that I said that I wanted to ask Chief Buckner, and I may have to ask the judge, I would like to talk to some of these criminals to see where did they come from? What kind of family background did they have? People just don't grow up to be violent. Something had to happen along the way. So that's my concern. But the other thing that I want to say, I did read, I don't want to call it Miss Pack. I read your article, and I hope that I can depend upon you with the words that you said in here, because I certainly have not received that from many of the board members up here. And they know that I will tell them that, because everything just about that I put before this board has been rejected. I will be looking for Mr. Carpenter and this board to assist me with the vacant houses that's in Ward 1. A lot of these houses cause crime. And I want to thank Mr. Moore and Chief Buckner for a house that was just a stone's throw from my house. I even called the owner first to let him know they were selling dope in that house. And then the chief sent a crew down there, and they did, I use the word bust. They busted the house. The woman was cooking drugs and everything else in that house. Across the alley from me has been a vacant house for 30 years. We shouldn't have to put up with that in the black community, and I have to say that. Something needs to be done. I'm tired of these landlords, most of them are Caucasians, that rent these dilapidated houses to these Negroes. It's not fair. And I think that Mr. Moore's staff or somebody's going to have to put more pressure on these landlords about these raggedy houses, that, like the apartment building that the city closed down. That's what you need to do with some of these houses. And I can tell you where the landlords own property in Ward 1. It's ridiculous. So I say and I challenge everybody on this board to get up off of it and to help us throughout this city. I could afford to move to Hillcrest if it was a vacant house, but I love where I live. I was born a stone's throw from the state capitol 86 years ago. And I would love to see this the area of Ward 1. It's ridiculous. Because where I'm living right now, a white judge lived in the house that I live in. So that area needs to be brought back. Mr. Moore, I'm going to be on you. Increase these salaries on these folk who do the type of work that I'm talking about. Because we need to do it. We need to stop playing games. And you all are going to hear from me as long as I'm up here. Okay? Thank you.
Director Wyrick, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I've done and some concerns that I've had. Shortly after the first toddler was killed, I did a welcome for an AME church in Southwest Little Rock. It was pastors from a number of churches in the city that attended, and they were about to start a planning meeting for all the churches to get involved. And two of the things that I brought to them was, one, that the city does a lot of work with kids and trying to keep them active and those kinds of things, and that in their activities in the church, that I was hopeful that in their planning that they would plan these activities for the children so they have a place to go after school, so they would do some things like that. The second thing that I asked them to do is to go back to their respective churches and talk to the individuals there about not being afraid to come forward if they see something in their community, because the policemen, you know, they have to put all these details together, and any little tidbit that they might have could bring the conclusion to a crime. And I told them that they should not be afraid, that they could remain anonymous, but just bring forward the tips. At that time, they were trying to find out information about the little girl that was killed. So that's what I've done, and I will continue to talk to people about those two issues. I think they're very important. The third thing that I would like to know about is it seems that, just reading from the newspaper, that a lot of these crimes are happening with young adults 17 to 25 years old, and they all have guns. And I don't know where they're getting the guns. I don't know if they've got that kind of money that they can purchase them, if they're stealing them, but it seems like they have guns. In a few years back, when Captain Hastings was at Southwest, and Bruce, I talked to you about this the other night, we had a situation where we had a gun-free zone area, and I believe it was around the Scott Hamilton area. And I ask you to look into that and see if that is something that we can participate in again. It seemed like there had to be some federal regulations that brought that in, that the city had to work with the federal government on that. And I don't really know how successful it was, but if we could get some of these guns out of the hands of these, I mean, they're children. They're you know, they're not adults, and they got to understand it's not a video game. It's, you know, it's the real deal. So if we can look into that gun-free zone. And I know I've got a few guns at my house, and I have hunter friends and that kind of thing, and that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting some way to get guns away from these kids that really don't take responsibility with them. So that's the things that I wanted to bring forward. It's I think one of the outcomes that I was very glad of was there was a vigil in Southwest Little Rock where the little boy was killed, and it was a very prayerful, emotional event, and there were probably 200 to 250 people that were there, and it was a group of ministers that got together and said, we've got to raise the awareness in the community of what's happened here and try to get this person to turn himself in. And I thought that was pretty effective. There may have been some other things that were inside to getting that person apprehended, but I thought that was a very effective approach to trying to get this person to come forward. And the vigil was held right down the street, right down the corner from where the little boy was shot. And as it turned out, the person that is supposed to have done this was a frequenter of the area. So if there's a peaceful type situation like that, when I know you're talking about raising awareness for all of these, not just the children, but if there's some sort of peaceful thing that could happen where it brings a group of people together that are located in the community, maybe that's an approach to take, just to raise the awareness that this is where something's happened. We're not going to tolerate this. We want it to stop, and maybe bring people to crime much faster. So those are the things that were on my mind tonight. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to go in? Did you have something else, Director Richardson? All right, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you, Mayor, and I want to piggyback or dovetail on some of the comments that Director Wright, Wyrick, and Hendricks made. I agree wholeheartedly on Director Wyrick that imagine if we had a vigil for every homicide that occurred in our community. And at the risk of offending our Second Amendment folks, I certainly agree there's certain parts of our community that need to be de-weaponized, Director Wright, that need to be de-weaponized. Because it seems to be a concentration. I don't know if anybody New Year's Eve was out in certain parts of our community. You would have thought you were in Iraq, the level of gunfire and the frequency of gunfire. There's certainly certain parts of our community that needs to be de-weaponized. And I agree, Director Wyrick, that church involvement is a must, is critical. And if we can have church involvement that goes beyond security guards riding on the parking lots, that they're actually engaged in those communities that they're working with. And Director Hendricks, your point about a certain group of people committing these acts, I would subscribe to you guys that if polar bears were killing each other at the rate that black males are doing it, we would stop. We would have a polar bear task force. We would say, what are the polar bears eating? What are they watching on TV? What are they listening to? Because that is abnormal. That's an aberration. And I promise you, if polar bears were doing it at the rate that young black men are doing to each other, society would stop. We would stop. We have a polar bear task force, and we try to figure out what the heck is going on that's causing this kind of behavior. And I think Director Wright and Wyrick and Hendricks made some great points. We do need to de-weaponize parts of our community at the risk of offending Second Amendment folks. We do need to have more church involvement, and we do have figure out a way, Director Hendricks, to bring more people around, more people in these communities that is happening in, because it's not their fault, it's not their responsibility. I think we can deal with this with the people who live in those communities and the people who are, how we're raising our young people, how we're educating our young people, and the institutions that are engaging these young people. This is not happening by accident. I think it's a systemic issue that we need to address rather than one specific policy, Director Wright. I think there are some policies, but I think a lot of this is systemic, and we need to have the same urgency to address the systemic stuff that we have with police recruitment and filling these vacancies in the police department. And that's the last thing I'll say on that, Mayor, I promise you.
Director Wright, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Since you mentioned task force, Director Richardson, Mayor, what happened to your task force that you had convene to deal?
Well, you were there at some of them.
Yeah, I was.
We met for a year, and we're finishing up a report on a variety of the issues that we discussed for publication.
So when can we expect a report? Because hopefully we would have some
Working on
solutions
it.
out of this.
Well,
If not
you
solutions,
know,
some policy
everybody wants a
things.
magic bullet, and I'll tell you, when you talk
There
about
is
the
no
issues
magic bullet.
of education and poverty, and you mix those two together without a lack of respect for people and without any parental guidance, we have a situation that is symptomatic in many large urban areas. And so, yes, there will be some recommendations. There are recommendations both local and at the state level that we covered. Director Webb helped to co-chair that, and we're in the process of getting it finished up and written. So we've got a couple of rough drafts on it now, and I'm trying to get the final edition out.
Okay. Well, I look
So
forward to.
I hope there's some recommendations that will be accepted. Some of them are at the state level, some of them are at the court level. The whole purpose of it was to have decision makers make these kinds of that can make decisions, do things such as why is there a standard bail when you have a person that's been arrested 3 times previously on burglary and they have a standard bail of $10,000 and they can get out of jail for $1,000 and go out here and do it again. I mean, there are issues like that that are not under our exclusive control, but certainly a more sensitive coordination between the various branches of government as it relates to criminal justice would be very helpful. So you're going to see some of those suggestions that come forward out of this. Electronic monitoring is going to be another one that is obviously one of the areas that we focused on. So I won't spend all the time today to go through all those lists of things, but
Thank you.
certainly we spent a whole year going through those things and had a lot of good discussion about it.
Okay.
And we have the violent crime reduction network as well, where we're coordinating with the federal authorities. Mr. Moore's staff is actively engaged in that. The city's actively engaged with the federal government on those issues. Includes the federal government adopting a variety of felon in possession of firearm cases and things of that nature, which we're trying to get more coordination with the federal government on.
Okay. Mr. Moore, could you prepare a report for us on what has been done and what is being planned, as well as I'd like an update on where we are with our youth master plan, because I know some of our systemic issues, we were hoping that we could address some of those with that plan. And we know that there's no silver bullet here, but there are some things I hope that we can do.
And we'll prepare that. One of the main things that I've been working with the chief and his staff, we put together the task force late last year, and I think it has been very productive. We're making that a permanent part of the patrol division. We've hired the lieutenant. Now we're putting the team together, and the goal was to remember when we did this back in early November. Late October, early November, we moved some COP officers, but because we needed to be able to react very quickly. This now will give us a more proactive team. It'll be permanent, and hopefully that will be in place by the end of January. That's on the law enforcement side. As the mayor said, we've talked about some strategies on recruitment, but it is holistic, and we've talked about this before. It's not just law enforcement. We've got to continue to actively engage our children, and so it really is going to continue, from my perspective, to be a comprehensive approach to public safety.
All right. Thank you.
Director Adcock, you're recognized.
Bruce, I would like to have a report on this class that we are getting ready to put together. Those people made applications, the ones that are waiting now to hear if they're going to be police officers, they made application in May or June, I believe. That was when they started. And they still have not been told if they're going to be police officers. And here we are 7 months out. Do we have any idea, if we're going to start a class in February, when are these people going to get notified if they're going to be officers?
Okay, those most of those should be occurring now. The other thing I will say is that as we've talked about, and we should have this plan or this report from the National Association of Chiefs by the end of January that looked at our entire process, not only from a PD standpoint, but from a HR recruitment standpoint, our testing that we've talked about a lot up here over the years. So I think we're going to have some very, I would say, major changes to how we have been testing and recruiting, and that product should be to us by the end of January.
One that has been waiting this 7 or 8 months has taken a job as a police officer in Benton. Another one has taken a job with the Arkansas Highway Patrol. So, we're losing them because the time, sitting around waiting 6 or 7 months.
And that's a big element of a major part of what I've asked that group to look at is how can we, again, I think it's very important that we don't reduce our standards. But, one of the things that I asked them to do was these automatic disqualifiers. I know a young man that's wanted to be a police officer. That's all he wanted to do, and he never couldn't even pass the first part of it because of the automatic disqualifiers. So that's another thing that they've looked at, and again, looking across the country to see, what are best practices. And there's some things that if you've done, you're not going to be a Little Rock police officer. But we really need to look at that list, and that's another area. But it does take too long from the time you apply to the time you start interviewing to the time you get hired. We've got to shorten that, and I believe we'll be able to.
In this day and time, you're sitting around waiting for something 7 or 8 months. Besides a baby, takes a long time. Right.
Director Richardson, you're recognized, please.
Yes, Mayor. Bruce, back on that point of hiring, I certainly can understand the objective parts, the physical tests, the written tests. I think one of the problems I've been wrestling with ever since I've been on this board is this subjective process, is the oral interview. And pass, fail of that interview can be determined based on the makeup of that interview panel. And have we made any progress on that aspect of hiring?
That'll be a part of it also. And I will tell you, the process we use, it has to stand up to legal scrutiny, and I feel very confident that it does. The problem was not so much the makeup of the panel, it was what we were looking for in the questions and what Chief Buckner, or the answers, and what Chief Buckner has said, I don't need someone before they go to the academy to know things that they're going to learn in the academy. I need them to have basic skills and knowledge. And so it's a change, and it's something that I think is going to be very positive as far as what type of questions we're asking. Sure. And what type of answers we're looking for, and so I think it's going to really be more focused not on what do you know about law enforcement, but what are your basic knowledges, skills, and abilities.
Well, that's the next point I want to raise a question. We do have non-law enforcement personnel on the panel. Is that right? I mean, the makeup of the interview panel, they're not all law enforcement. We do have non-law enforcement personnel on the makeup of the review, the oral interview process.
The initial, there's a few panels, but yeah, the initial one it does include non-law enforcement.
Well, I guess the other part of the cognitive dissonance for me is what particular questions could you and would you ask in the interview that you couldn't and wouldn't ask in the written part of the test?
Again, Director, that's all the things that we're looking at. The questions as they're even now, I remember having this conversation with Chief Thomas when you raised the question years ago. Even the chief doesn't supposed to see the questions. I mean, that's, and Chief Buckner said, I got a big problem with me not being able to see the questions that we're asking people to join. So that's changing, but that was the process that had been employed.
Thank you, Bruce.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. Mayor, I want to ask Mr. Moore, it seems that there has been a large number of persons who have failed the test. Is that true? I get a lot of information. I know a lot of people.
Well, a lot of people pass the written test. I mean, it's not that. I mean, but we look at percentages, and we look at nationwide what our acceptable passage rate. So we're there.
Is the oral? Where is it?
A lot of it is the time it takes. A lot of it is, all right, you pass the oral and you pass the written, and then you get this big book that's called a background check, and you start going through that, and you say, well, I'm not filling that out because, you know, I did something 3 years ago.
Is that the
so,
applicant?
So we lose a lot of applicants in the background area. I sent y'all a report, I can bring it back out, but it kind of showed at each step where we lost. But I will tell you, when I'm told it takes 1,000 applicants to get a class of 50, there's something we've got to adjust.
Something wrong with the system. Is something wrong with the system,
And
not the
I
people?
don't disagree, and that's why we went through this process in 2016. And it won't impact this first class, hopefully by the second class of 2017, or maybe the third, that we're going to try to run at least 3 or 4 classes this year too.
This panel that does the oral, do you have any lay persons on that commission?
Now, they're city employees.
I think that needs to change. You got
Well, there's-
attitudes
There's
among
liability
personnel.
issues when you start bringing.
Is it required?
Well, again, that's all being
If you've
revamped.
never had it, you can't say it's a liability. Come on now. You're not talking to a third grader. Okay.
Vice Mayor Hines, you recognized.
Mayor, motion we go into executive session for the purposes of selecting a vice mayor and board appointments.
There's a motion and a second to go into executive session. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. We're in executive session. Now back in session, having returned from executive session. Let me announce that we have gone ahead and made assignments for the boards and commissions, and staff is going to prepare a resolution with the names affixed to those for our next meeting. So we'll take care of that issue in that manner. At this time, let me ask for a motion for nomination to vice mayor. Is there a motion? No. I need somebody to.
I nominate Kathy Webb.
Kathy Webb has been nominated and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Kathy, congratulations. I'll see you over here next week. All right, very good. Is there any other business that needs to come before us? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Second. There's a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Thank you all. We're in adjournment.